Flip side, Lawrence, Ben Johnson in Chicago now with Caleb Williams. How much do you upgrade Caleb with getting one of the best offensive minds?
You got to upgrade him a little bit. And you talked about, are you surprised? Would we be surprised if Caleb Williams was a top 8 quarterback? I wouldn't be surprised if he was a top 5 quarterback. And this is why. Again, the rookie season was not bad. It's just that Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix existed. Both went to the playoffs. Jaden Daniels was extremely exceptional when he played. But again, Caleb Williams, a guy who's 11 yards shy rushing for 500 yards. That is valuable. He's a top 8 quarterback runner in the league. So you add that, you add the offensive line. They're probably going to draft a running back to take the load off him in the draft there. So I think you got to see him as around being a top 10 to 12 fantasy quarterback.
Caleb Williams wasn't terrible last year. That's the thing of it. The issue that Caleb Williams had is that he was drafted first overall, and that Jaden Daniels went nuclear.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, like, given everything else that he was dealing with in Chicago, like, Caleb Williams is fine. And I honestly think that if there wasn't that meltdown on Thanksgiving, if Jaden Daniels doesn't have a Hail Mary, against them in week 6 or 7 that was, like, I think the narrative on Caleb Williams is probably different, right? Or if Jaden Daniels didn't have the kind of year, there were flaws in Caleb Williams' game last year, but there were also flashes where you went like, that's why that guy was drafted number 1 overall. And so, to your point, giving him more time and protection, I think Adunze will emerge as well. I don't think they're done adding to that wide receiver room. We'll see what happens in the draft or sort of the rest of free agency. Who knows if Keenan Allen ends up coming back or not. But I do think Caleb Williams is pretty interesting next year once you get into the second tier.
Ironically, though, the one reason why I'm a little glass half empty on him in fantasy is, and this is better for him as a pro, what if they draft Ashton Genty at 10? And I think this defense is going to be really good under Dennis Allen.
Yeah.
He won't be in those scripts where it's like, hey, Caleb, drop back 25 times this half. So he will be a better pro. I don't know if he'll be asked to be a better fantasy quarterback. That remains to be seen.
Which is 100% fair, and I think, but
I could see those rushing numbers for Caleb Williams going like that. Almost 500 could be like 350.
Right.
And that you lose, like, that's 15 yards a game right there. So
yeah, and I think if they do end up drafting Genty, I think I'll move him down a little bit. But I put him where I put him just because I do think there's an upside to Caleb Williams that isn't there with some of these guys. Some of these guys, it's like there's a limit to the ceiling. But to your point, like, Caleb Williams, there's just such a wide range of outcomes. To your point, like, if we're a year from now, we're talking about Caleb Williams, top 5 fantasy quarterback, I'm not going to be shocked. No. But also, if we're a year from now, we're talking about, well, Caleb was QB 17 last year. Also wouldn't be shocked as well on a points per game basis.
And he could have still played like good football, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It's just not going to be got to be a thing. Very quickly on Goff as well, I just want to point out. So their offense coordinator is John Morton, who was on that staff in 2022. So again, it is going to be a lot of the same offense. He's still going to have a very good offensive line.
Yep. With Caleb, we've had in recent years some MVP winners come out of nowhere. Patrick Mahomes in effectively his rookie season was 50-1 to win MVP. Lamar Jackson, the year that he won in his second year, he was 50-1. Caleb Williams is the guy, I think, in that 50-1 range, who I don't think Caleb Williams is going to win MVP, but if you talk about someone who has upside, and that lends itself to fantasy as well, just in terms of the huge amount of variance with Caleb, he would be the guy for me. Connor, I think a guy with less variance is Bo Nix, who had an excellent rookie year, but a lot of it was with short stuff, with dink and dunk, and also with using his legs, and he's number 12 in Matthew's rankings, 1 spot behind Caleb Williams. With Bo, what type of quarterback do you think he's going to look like this year? Do you think it's going to be the same, a lot of short stuff, or do you think that he has the scope to expand his game down the field?
It's going to be interesting if he can replicate, it's the same combo, the rushing. That's the biggest. Like, do they need him to replicate that rushing? This team, I think they have running back in play in the first round, if not the first round. After that, they really want a special running back in this offense, and that makes life a little easier down in the red zone for Bo Nix and in short yardage situations. But on the flip side, I think they got Evan Ingram, and I think they'll draft another pass catcher where he'll have more weapons to work with. So I think more of the same for Bo Nix, which was really damn good as a rookie.
Yeah, I mean, again, like, it took him a little while, but like over his final 10 games, week 8 on, he was the 6th best quarterback in fantasy on a points per game basis. Like, this is a crazy stat. There were 4 quarterbacks last year that had at least 3,500 passing yards and at least 400 rushing yards. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, and Bo freaking Nix. And so, to your point, like maybe the distribution, if they draft like Hampton, if they draft like a special running back, so maybe the distribution of his fantasy points is slightly different. Maybe the passing goes up a little bit more and the rushing comes down.
That's what I could see.
Second year in the system, to your point, they added Evan Ingram, and it's not like the rushing is going to go away. You know what I mean? Like, he's too good as a runner for Sean Payton to be like, yeah, I just need you to, sit back in that pocket. Like, it's still going to be a part of the offense as well. So, yeah, I mean, I think I have Bo Nix at 12, but again, he's a guy that you could see easily, being a QB1 next year.
He was a top 10 quarterback in fantasy points per game last season, but he finished ahead of guys like Kyler Murray, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Fields, Caleb Williams. Those would all be guys right there that I probably would be willing to take over Bo Nix this year, who were not in the top 10 last year. We've seen Fields be a top 5 quarterback in fantasy. Now that he's got the starting spot. So it's just like a guy like a Mahomes, like he could end up like Bo Nix was ahead of him last year. I don't see the same this year.
Yep.
I just feel like with Bo Nix, he's going to be one of those guys who's going to be underrated in fantasy because he's not a flashy player. He plays in Denver, West Coast, right? And just like he wasn't drafted with a lot of fanfare, and so he's still not Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels, and then Cam Ward's going to get buzz this year as well. And I just feel like people just never gave Bo Nix any credit last year, and just all he did every week was put up fantasy points.
He gives you a floor at the position, which is valuable.
Yeah, he's deeply unsexy. There's some Mac Jones aspects to Bo Nix.
But with running.
But with
right,
running.
yeah.
The thing is with the running, though, is that at midseason last year, Bo Nix was like lapping the league in scrambles without pressure. Like, it just seems like he was taking off in the pocket to kind of the detriment of his game, but in a way that was beneficial for fantasy. And then I suspect what's going to happen is he's going to provide less value with his legs, but more value with his arm.
Yep.
Let's jump to Jordan Lawrence, who is one of the most, I think, enigmatic quarterbacks. So I can't really get a handle on what he is in terms of a player or his statistical production. Think back to the playoffs a couple of years ago after he lit up the Cowboys, that first half against the Niners. It's like, is this guy like the 5th best quarterback in football? Then a strange year last year, dealt with some injuries. What do you think his ceiling is?
Yeah, well, that year he was quarterback 6 in fantasy points per game. In 2024, it don't seem like it, but he was quarterback 13. But it was like he had a couple of big games here and there. He only had 2 weeks as a top 3 quarterback in fantasy. So it's like you didn't get a lot of great games and a lot of consistency. You got some blow-up games here and there. And then you look at the fact that the Packers were a top 5 team in running attempts. Now, you had also the Buccaneers in there and the Lions, who they had 2 quarterbacks who don't run the ball, but they're extremely efficient in the passing game, which the Packers weren't last year. The thing with the Packers is you look for where the receivers at. I just talked about the Bucs. You got Mike Evans, Chris Godwin.
Yeah.
You got the Lions, Amon-Ra St. Brown, James Williams. So with the Packers, I would feel a lot better about this if we just knew, like, hey, who's that guy?
The guy,
receiver,
exactly.
So that would be the difference for me.
I fully agree. That's the problem of why I'm not high on Jordan Love this year, is that they don't have an alpha wide receiver to funnel the pass game through, and I don't think they want to. I think they want to run the football, and they like the manufactured stuff to Jaden Reed, and obviously, they've dealt with injury at the position as well. And this is not a draft where you sit there and go, I know they're going to come away with the number 1 wide receiver in this draft. It's not that kind of draft class.
And Matt LaFleur has always wanted to run. Like 2 years ago when Jordan Love had like the really good fantasy season, he was running more, and they got very lucky in terms of red zone passing touchdowns as well. But like last year, they were 31st in pass rate, right? Love had under 30 pass attempts in 8 of his final 10 games. He finished higher than QB 15 only 2 times during that stretch. And oh, by the way, it worked.
Right,
like
that's the thing.
The
Right,
Packers,
they're in the playoffs.
honestly, they got in the playoffs. And honestly, I think if a couple calls go their way against the Eagles, they might have won that game. Like, they were right in it. They got screwed by the refs. I still don't understand the kickoff return fumble call. No. That one made no sense because the exact same call happened against the Commanders where in the Packers, they came out with the Packers came out with a ball, and they're like, no, the Eagles recovered it on the ground.
Yeah, you won't have
and then
to
Austin Eckler fumbles it, and a commander comes out with the ball, and they're like, no.
Everyone's talking about,
it was very inconsistent.
Quick aside, everyone's talking about the Eagles as some absolute juggernaut. Matthew Stafford was on like the 16-yard line, had a chance to beat them, and I think the Rams were favored in that game for a brief time. Anyway, the Eagles, they are a juggernaut of sorts, but they could have very easily lost.
They could have easily lost, but my point being is that I don't think as the Packers, as Matt LaFleur and his staff look back on last season of the Packers, I don't think they're sitting there going like, man, we got to fix this. Like, it worked. They rode Josh Jacobs down the stretch. They played good football. They played very good defense. They ran the ball well. They took their shots with Jordan Love, and it worked. Like, you know what I mean? And so they lost a road game to the Eagles, but I don't think, they have anything to hang their heads about that particular game. So nothing that happened last year makes me think like, oh, this is a team that's suddenly going to change its offensive philosophy, because LaFleur has always wanted to be very balanced on offense and maybe even lean a little bit more run heavy. And so I just don't see Jordan Love. I think we're much more likely to get last year's version of Jordan Love than 2 years ago, fantasy-wise.
At cost, I'd rather have Michael Penix.
Yeah.
If I was going 100%. For somebody like a three-point shooter, a big play hunter. Yeah. At cost, which
the thing is, Jordan Love is a big play hunter too, but he don't got no big play getter like a Drake London.
Exactly.
Throw the ball to.
Yep. Okay, another enigmatic quarterback, Connor, is Trevor Lawrence, who has perhaps the best situation of his career now with an offensive mind like Liam Cohen. Do you think that generational prospect that he was drafted at is still in there?
It is. I don't think he'll ever reach that status. Like, do I expect to be this time next year having him in the combo alongside Joe Burrow? I just don't. But if you need reasons for optimism for Trevor Lawrence this year, what more do you need? You have Liam Cohen, who it feels like he knows what he's doing calling plays. Brian Thomas Jr., who everybody at this desk is extremely high on as a number one wide receiver in the NFL. They spent a ton of money on the offensive line in the offseason. Like, what more does Trevor Lawrence need? So it's all there for the upside, but you also do need to be careful of doing this is the year. And this is somebody that the injuries have just piled up on him over the years. He's got to stay healthy back there.
Yeah, Brenton Strange. Don't forget Brenton Strange, baby.
Parker Washington. Yeah. We're all here and ready to go.
We're excited.
Gabe Davis is down there somewhere.
Yes, exactly. No, but right. I mean, it's in there somewhere. Like last season under Cohen, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were top 3 in passing yards and passing touchdowns. And one of the reasons he was hired, probably the main reason he was hired, was fix Trevor Lawrence. Yes. Get Trevor Lawrence back. And it's not like Trevor Lawrence has been a bust. What's been, you think about Trevor Lawrence is like he gets drafted by Urban Meyer, and it's a complete disaster. Okay, and Doug Peterson comes in, and then we see some flashes. And then there's a lot of injuries. There's some questionable front office moves as well.
Right.
And, they don't surround him necessarily with the best talent. He also deals with some injuries. And so Trevor Lawrence has been fine, but this is somebody that has gotten the Jaguars to playoff, to a playoff game. Like has had some big wins. You think about that comeback win against the Chargers. That's like one of the great NFL games of the last 4 years. And so, I mean, I'm holding out hope. I would be more optimistic about Trevor Lawrence than not. Having said that, like, I do think he's kind of an interesting flyer. I mean, again, like I'm pretty far down here, right? But like, it's not outside the realm of possibility that he could suddenly be. He could be this year's Baker Mayfield. He could be this year's Sam Darnold. Right? I mean, because he's got that skill set, and there's enough talent around him. That offensive system as well. And it's not like the defense is going to be amazing.
Oh no, man, Baker Mayfield. I just feel like people always say this stuff about players, but I just feel like Baker Mayfield got that dog in him. So I don't know if what Liam Cohen did with Baker is like just automatically transferable to,
not automatically.
Like I just think Baker is like the resilience in his career and what he had to go through to get to this point. I think there's some different like makeup between the two guys.
I think that's completely fair. My counter to that would be 1,000%. I mean, Baker's kind of a badass, and at least so far, Trevor has not been to that level. But there are a lot of similarities in that both guys drafted number 1 overall. Both guys struggled early in their career. Both guys showed flashes earlier in their career, but also were considered like, I don't know. And so then, Baker has the kind of year he has under Canales and sort of then establishes himself, that wasn't a fluke under Liam Cohen. And so I think there's a chance with Trevor Lawrence. I think there's also a chance that he is what he is, and that's why you have him in the, you have him in this range. I'm at QB 18, but I'm just saying, like, is there the question is there potential optimism for Trevor Lawrence? And I think the answer is yes.
His best season in 2022, he was quarterback 12 in fantasy. You have him at 18, so if he could get to that point, like 25 touchdowns, 8 picks like he had that year, then yeah.
All right, let's jump to 21 through 30, starting off with Connor's man, Michael Penix Jr., Tua Tagovailoa at 22, J.J. McCarthy expected to be the starter, Cam Ward, likely the starter for the Tennessee Titans, Matthew Stafford, Bryce Young, Sam Darnold, now in Seattle, Anthony Richardson, who has a huge range of outcomes, Derek Carr, and then Shedeur Sanders at 30. Matthew, who in this range do you think has the best chance of being this year's Sam Darnold? And you can choose Sam Darnold if you want.
No, I appreciate that, and I'll say it's Tua Tagovailoa. I mean, again, like, he's somebody, he needs to stay healthy. Tyreek Hill needs to get back to being Tyreek Hill, but when you think about Tyreek and Jonnu Smith and Jalen Waddle and Devon Achane out of the backfield, if Tua's healthy the entire year, he's got top 10 upside. You know what I mean? And so, to me, I think it's Tua just about, it all comes down to the health of him and his skill position players. One quick thing I just want to mention when you're like, wow, Anthony Richardson 28, that's because I did these rankings as if I'm drafting today. Obviously, if they came out and said Anthony Richardson is a starter, is going to start every game, he's much higher. But it's just because there's a chance he misses some games. There's a chance Daniel Jones wins this job. Like, it's just the uncertainty of his role that has him that far down at this stage of the rankings.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and Rotoworld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Roto-World fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.